David, you guys have had urgent cares for a long time. I'm assuming you guys do some goal setting once a year, or how do you guys do that?
We have a January retreat with our urgent care leaders, and we ask each leader to come up with 3 specific measurable goals. We want them to be what we call SMARTS goals: specific, measurable, attainable, and realistic. And so, and timely is the last aspect. So if we have specific measurable goals, a lot of times people will our leaders in the past, when they would come, we want to be a more friendly clinic. Well, that's a nice thing, but what is it? What's measurable about being more friendly? Well, we want patients to rate us, instead of 90%, we want 95% saying we're friendly. That would be a measurable goal. So we asked our leaders to have at least 3 specific measurable goals for the year, in each of their departments.
Good. I think that's reasonable too. And we do a similar thing. We have a little bit of a retreat. One of the things we do is we'll review the previous year and say, what did we do right? What are the things we did correct? And what are the things we did maybe not so good and that we could improve on? Some of the things we could do better maybe in the next year. So sort of what areas in your business, in your urgent cares, what areas particularly do you guys tend to focus on when you're just setting your goals?
I think the main thing that we can control is the customer service. We can't control whether there's a robust flu season or weak flu season, and that's going to have a large impact on our financials in most years. What we can do is we can on the customer service side, we can measure the customer service based on the feedback we get from the patients. And on the marketing side, we can measure whether or not our marketing techniques are working. If we want to increase a certain clinic from 20% coming from the internet to 25%, that's a measurable goal. We can see that we have control over that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've tried to do in the past too, is we'll break down our goals into things like occupational medicine goals. What are our occupational medicine goals this year? How many new companies do we want to take on? What kind of services can we provide from them? Urgent care goals. We recently started a wellness program, so we set some wellness program goals and we break them into those. And we try and do like you do, which is make them measurable. Some of the things that, some challenges that certainly we've had in the past is what you said, which is, it's easy to say, let's be better at something. But to actually break that down and make it into numbers, and to be frank with you, the hardest part has been for me is part of an organization this year where they said, okay, you need to define what are your top 3 goals for your business. It's easy to find the top 50. It's hard to break those top 50 down into the top 3. And sometimes prioritizing is the most difficult part, I think.
And one of the things we have every leader do, we didn't do this initially, and what we found out is people would set their goals and then they wouldn't report back on them. So the first thing they have to do is report back on last year's 3 goals and how they did in meeting those goals. It's somewhat sobering. Sometimes you'll find a leader say, well, the business went a different direction, and so I didn't meet any of my goals, but here's what I did do.
Yeah.
And sometimes that was okay,
yeah.
But it's important. It shouldn't have been a mistake,
yeah.
And it should have been reviewed with the CEO of the company if you're going to take a different tack.
Yeah, I think goals are kind of they're fluctuating. Sometimes even my own personal goals. I may set personal goals in January, and something happens in March which completely changes what I thought my goal for the year was going to be. So you have to be flexible in things. So, Tina, anything to add to that?
I think the one thing that we do at the clinic that I think is neat is we set the goals from the beginning of the year together, and then we do the weekly priority list that goes back to our monthly goals, that goes back to our yearly goals, and those are sent directly to Tim. And then at the end of the week, we do what we've completed on our task list, and then that's also to see did we reach our goals, and that kind of helps us make sure we're going back and forth to the goals that we originally set throughout the year and reevaluating the goals.
Yeah, I have each member of my executive committee meeting every Monday send me a priority list, and a priority list for us is if I didn't have anything else to do, in other words, if all of these things that ring and come at me that I wasn't expecting this week, what would I spend my time doing? What is my top priority if I wasn't doing all these other things that come to us? And I think that kind of keeps us on task of remembering what are the most of you guys have been doing this a lot longer than we have, so I'm sure you guys have learned some lessons along the way as well.
Well, one of the focuses we've had in the last year is every month when I meet with the leaders in the software company specifically, same thing, leadership is leadership, is we talked about quadrants, urgent and important, versus non-urgent important. I think most people are aware of those quadrants, but the tendency is for leaders to get caught in the urgent important things, and they're running around chasing their tails all day long doing good things, but never getting to the urgent non-important things, planning long-term projects that make a big difference in the company. Instead, they're just putting out fires all day long. So we actually have, as a leadership, come together each month, and we've been holding ourselves accountable for doing at least one significant non-urgent important task each month.
Yeah, I think if you don't make that happen, it doesn't happen.
That's right.
And we call it thinking time. I always emphasize these guys, every week you have to set aside some thinking time, and that's thinking time to me is where I don't do anything but think about the problems that I have at hand and what are the possible solutions to those problems, and that the daily things the urgent will just take you over if you're not careful of that. So good. Well, that's exciting, and I think it's invaluable, especially if you're starting a new clinic. It's invaluable that you sit down with your partners, your staff, and say, what kind of a clinic do we want to be? What kind of customer service do we want to offer? And then you set some measurable goals that can help you to reach those places as you go along. So